Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. The Human Rights Watch says Indian forces are maiming, blinding and killing people in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In a statement, the international watchdog asked India to completely stop using pellet guns on unarmed civilians in the valley. It said Indian law enforcement's use of shotguns has resulted in shocking and grievous injuries to the protesters. The United Nations has called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Afghanistan ahead of intra-Afghan negotiations in Doha. In a briefing to the UN Security Council, Secretary General Special Representative for Afghanistan, Deborah Lyons, said the truce is crucial to ensure that humanitarian efforts are delivered and will be a win for all the parties, including Afghan people. The NATO says Turkey and Greece have agreed to hold technical talks to de-escalate tensions in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg says the two sides will discuss establishing mechanisms for military deconfliction to reduce the risk of incidents. NATO members Athens and Ankara have been at odds over gas exploration claims and activities in rich waters. In Brazil, 834 more people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, taking the tally to over 124,000. The world's third worst hit country, India, has recorded 1,096 deaths and more than 83,000 cases overnight. In Pakistan, 7 people lost their lives to the virus in the last 24 hours, raising the death toll to 6,335. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 868,000 lives, while infecting over 26 million. Those were the headlines and detailed stories. Right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. The Human Rights Watch says Indian forces are maiming, blinding and killing people in occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In a statement, the international watchdog asked India to completely stop using pellet guns on unarmed civilians in the valley. The HRW says 17 people had died from pellets between 2015 and 17. It said Indian law enforcement's use of shotguns has resulted in shocking and grievous injuries to the protesters. Moreover, HRW said Indian authorities need to recognize that the use of this weapon on civilians violates international laws. Pakistan's military says 3 soldiers have embraced martyrdom after an IED attack on security forces in the northwestern province of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. In a statement, the military's media wing said the attack in the North Waziristan district left 4 other soldiers wounded. It said the soldiers were providing protection to the construction teams working in the area. The martyred soldiers were identified as Lieutenant Nasir Hussain Khalid, Muhammad Imran and Osman Akhtar. The United Nations has called for a humanitarian ceasefire in Afghanistan ahead of the intra-Afghan negotiations in Doha. In a briefing to the UN Security Council, Secretary General's Special Representative for Afghanistan, Deborah Lyons, said the truce is crucial to ensure that humanitarian efforts are delivered and will be a win for all the parties, including Afghan people. Lyons said the peace talks will be a long and challenging process. She said attacks by spoilers targeting civilians involved in the peace process have hit near record numbers in the last few weeks. Earlier, Pakistan and Afghan politician Gulbuddin Hikmatyar also warned of spoilers in the peace process to destabilize the country. The NATO says Turkey and Greece have agreed to hold technical talks to de-escalate tensions in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. NATO members Athens and Ankara have been at odds over gas exploration claims and activities in rich waters. NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg says the two sides will discuss establishing mechanisms for military deconfliction to reduce the risk of incidents. He said the alliance is in close touch with all the concerned members to find a solution to the tensions in the spirit of NATO solidarity. Meanwhile, Turkey says it is ready for a dialogue to resolve the dispute without any preconditions. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said Ankara hopes to find a permanent solution within the framework of international law. Serbia's President Alexander Vučić has rejected a U.S. proposal of mutual recognition with Kosovo. Talking to reporters in Washington after talks with a delegation from Kosovo, Vučić said discussions are still underway, but he has clearly told interlocutors he will not recognize Kosovo's independence. The president said the first round of the discussions was not easy and simple, but he was satisfied with the readiness of the Serbian delegation. Meanwhile, White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien said Kosovo and Serbia are already making progress. He said the talks on the first day were centered on the normalization of economic ties. Russia says it fully supports the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of Belarus amid the ongoing political crisis. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin said this after visiting Belarus to hold talks with President Alexander Lukashenko. Mishustin said Belarus must not give in to the external pressure by the West. During the meeting, Lukashenko said Belarus had intercepted a conversation between Poland and Germany. Lukashenko claimed the intercepted calls showed that Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny's poisoning had been faked. Belarus has been rocked by weeks of protests against the alleged rigging in the last month's presidential vote. France has called on the U.S. to withdraw sanctions on International Criminal Court prosecutor Fatou Bensouda. In a statement, Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said the measures announced are a grave attack against the court. He said the decision has put multilateralism and the independence of judiciary into question. The French Foreign Minister pledged Paris's unwavering support for the court and its staff. On Wednesday, the U.S. imposed sanctions on Bensouda over her investigation into whether American forces committed war crimes in Afghanistan. The U.S. also blacklisted head of the ICC's jurisdiction complementarily and cooperation division Fakiso Mochochoko. 7 U.S. police officers have been suspended in the New York state over the death of an unarmed black man who suffocated after being restrained. Announcing the suspension, Rochester's Mayor Lovely Warren said systematic racism led to the death of Daniel Prude. The move to suspend the 7 officers is the first disciplinary action since Prude's death. Meanwhile, protesters took to the streets of Washington after police fatally shot a young black man. Demonstrators marched to the mayor's residence, calling on her to fire the police chief. Deon Kay's killing comes amid a nationwide protest movement denouncing police violence against African American people. A new wave of demonstrations also sprung in Kenosha, Wisconsin, following the shooting of Jacob Blake 10 days ago, while a car drove into Black Lives Matter protesters in Times Square in New York, hitting several people on foot and on bicycles. President Mahmoud Abbas says no one is authorized to speak on Palestine's behalf and only they will speak for themselves and their cause. During a video conference, heads of the Palestinian groups in Ramallah and Beirut, Abbas said the Arab countries didn't abide by their financial commitments towards Palestine. Abbas, the Palestinian Authority, rejects the U.S. to be the only mediator in any negotiations with Israel. He also called for an international peace conference under the supervision of the UN based on the Arab peace initiative. On August the 13th, the UAE and Israel announced a US-brokered agreement to normalize their relations, including opening embassies in each other's territory. The Palestinian Authority and resistant factions have denounced the UAE-Israel deal, calling it a betrayal of the Palestinians' trust. In Brazil, 834 more people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, taking the tally to over 124,000. The world's third worst hit country, India has recorded 1,096 deaths and more than 83,000 cases overnight. Now, globally, the virus has claimed more than 868,000 lives while infecting over 26 million. More in this report.
Thousands continue to die every day from the new coronavirus in India and the US as the country struggle to contain the raging outbreak. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has ruled out making COVID-19 vaccination mandatory as the country's infections topped 4 million, while the White House has refused the World Health Organization's authentication for its vaccine in the works. But US doctors warn against rushing a COVID-19 immunization to be used as a tool for election campaign.
I just think that given it's a 2-dose vaccine, that we're still not fully recruited for the first dose, that we have to wait a month for a second dose, then we have to wait another 2 weeks till we get full immunity from that second dose. And then people in the placebo group have to get sick, not just infected, but get sick. I just can't imagine how that all happens by the end of October.
The pandemic is once again finding foothold in Europe, where England has reported its highest number of weekly cases since end of May. In France, centers are ramping up testing in an effort to reach 1 million tests per week amid rising rate of spread. In Spain, thousands of teachers have undergone COVID-19 tests days before a fresh academic year starts. Meanwhile, New Zealand has decided to retain coronavirus measures across the country until mid-September.
That is why today Cabinet decided to retain the current settings, with the next review to take place on Monday the 14th of September. If at that time a change in alert levels is made, it will be time to take effect from 11:59 on Wednesday the 16th of September.
In Asia, South Korea continues to grapple with ways to stem local spread as it reports 198 new cases in the past 24 hours, while China has kept local transmission at zero for the past 2 weeks now.
In Pakistan, 7 more people have lost their lives to the new coronavirus, raising the death toll to 6,335. The Health Ministry said 498 new cases of the disease were detected as the rate of infection spread continues to decline. The ministry said the number of active cases in the country is at 8,909. The ministry said with a 95% rate of recovery, over 282,000 patients out of some 297,000 have recovered. Sindh remains the most affected province with over 130,000 infections, while Punjab has reported 97,000 cases so far. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. China says it has paid a cost of at least $29 billion after the country faced worst floods for the first time since 1998. In a news conference, an official of the Emergency Management Ministry said the floods affected nearly 70 million citizens across 28 provinces. Li Kungang said around 751 rivers in China passed their warning levels, while 3 major rivers had faced floods. The ministry has also warned of recurring potential floods during autumn. China is witnessing heavy rainfall this season, triggering floods in most southern parts of the country. In Germany, the bodies of 5 children have been found in an apartment in the western city of Sillingen. Police say they found the bodies after being alerted by the children's grandmother. A police spokesman said the 27-year-old mother tried to take her own life at a train station in nearby Düsseldorf. The mother, who is suspected of the children's murder, is being treated in hospital under police guard. Police are still trying to find out the background to the tragedy. The coronavirus medical waste has been polluting Indonesian waters, which presents a looming health risk as it can trigger the COVID-19 outbreak again. More in this report.
Medical waste from across Indonesia has been polluting the water bodies in the country. According to the Health Ministry data, 1,500 tons of COVID-19 medical waste was produced in the country each day from March to June. Recently, a waste landfill site collapsed in Tangerang City, sending hundreds of tons of medical leftovers in the Sisadane River. Residents living downstream have reported a constant stream of medical waste washing up on the banks, leading to potential uncontrolled spread of the coronavirus.
This river is a water source for the whole Tangerang area, and we are concerned about the sustainability of this river. We don't want it polluted with any waste, including industrial waste, which is dangerous, especially during this pandemic. If we find medical waste that is used to treat COVID-19 patients, it's even more dangerous.
As Indonesia struggled to contain the spread of the coronavirus, its health ministry has acknowledged that pandemic caused an increase in medical waste.
A new regulation has just passed that consists of guidelines for medical waste treatment in every health facility. We have been pushing for this regulation with help from the Environment Ministry because of this issue. So our concept is that medical waste treatment must be handled on a regional basis.
The ministry also admitted the country lacks treatment facilities, but said it is working to find a solution.
An adventurer in Arizona floats 25,000 feet in the air, hanging with a cluster of giant-sized balloons. David Blaine, 47, kept dropping some weight on the ground during his flight to speed his ascent. After reaching a little higher than the height of Mount Everest, David strapped to an oxygen mask to assist breathing. The adventure lasted for half an hour as David released himself from the balloons and free fell for 30 seconds before opening his parachute. Blaine has a history of performing high-profile and high-risk stunts, such as locking himself in fishbowl, trapping himself in ice block for 2 days, and standing on tall, thin tower. His latest feat also went without any glitches, and he reached back to the Earth safe and sound. Brazil's economy has officially entered a recession following the lockdown restrictions imposed by the coronavirus pandemic. This comes as the country's economy shrinks by largest on record in the second quarter. More in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic in Brazil has taken more than 123,000 lives so far and has pushed millions into unemployment. COVID-19 triggered a 9.7% fall in gross domestic product from the prior quarter, reflecting the effect of widespread economic shutdowns. The record economic crisis has set off a wave of corporate bankruptcies. Government Statistics Agency IBGE said the magnitude of the slump in activity across the economy in the second quarter is huge.
The negative result of the GDP in the second quarter of the year 2020 characterizes that Brazil entered a technical recession because in the first quarter we had already experienced a decrease.
Brazil's economy is now 15% smaller than it was at its peak in 2014. Industry fell 12.3%, household consumption 12.5%, and government spending by 8.8%. IBGE says household consumption, which accounts for 2/3 of all economic activity in the country, has particularly hit hard. Meanwhile, Brazil's economy ministry says the country has begun a V-shaped recovery.
The initial impact, apparently a 10% fall. 9.7% was what the IBGE showed today, but in truth, that's far from real. It's just an estimation of the impact of the pandemic, and it is where Brazil would be if we had not introduced all the measures we did together with Congress. What really happened is that with these measures, we managed to have a U-turn. The economy is returning to its original state.
The government's current forecast is for a 4.7% contraction this year, which will still be the largest annual fall in records dating back to 1900.
Asia-Pacific stocks have slumped following Wall Street's sharp declines overnight and escalating Sino-US tensions. Australia's ASX 200 has stumbled more than 3%, leading the losses. Mainland Chinese stocks have also fallen, with the Shanghai Composite and the Shenzhen Component shedding well over 1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has slipped close to 2%, while the Kospi in South Korea dropped over 1.5%. Meanwhile, Japan's Nikkei 225 declined and the Topix Index both shed over 1%. Overall, the MSCI Asia ex-Japan Index slid down more than 1.5%. Now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.